Cooking for bass, shout out bass god, space. Bay god, flame, flame, turn me up some, flame. Bay god on the sea.
My name is Sai Murray, and my experience of mental health and well-being dates back to when I was living in London, fresh out of university as a 3-year-old, and I was following the American dream, or American nightmare as I later came to see it. And like I say, I was young. I didn't really have the support network in London. Didn't have too many friends or family connections, and so I was running around trying to get a job in a very creative industry, a very competitive industry, which is advertising. And while this was happening, I was totally concentrated on getting a job, developing my portfolio, which is what you need to do to get a job in advertising. And I was living, breathing, and even kind of not sleeping words and copy and slogans. So that all culminated in me, not sleeping and just connecting words. So I would walk down the street and I would see a sign, and I would start playing with words about the sign, and I would constantly think of ideas. So when that started happening, my ideas kind of escalated from trying to get a job in advertising to thinking, just a sec, I can bypass this. I can actually, save the world potentially. I can use these powers that I've developed, and I was having a good time. To cut a long story short, and I did escalate that behaviour from kind of thinking the ideas to actually carrying out some sort of social experiments, let's say, and walking around barefoot and breaking into places and trying to get arrested and trying to speak to Tony Blair to solve world peace. So I was having a good time, but I was eventually arrested for this activity. It came to a head when I tried to break into a police station, and I enjoyed it. It was funny at the time, but I think I was at that stage of danger to not just myself but maybe other people. So that was my initial breakdown, which I now see as a spiritual awakening, because it was a needed break from that world of trying to get into advertising and follow that route of money and fame. That was my first experience, like I say, when I was around 23, and I hadn't really had any other experience of mental unwellness until then. I'd always been very confident at school, fairly confident, very sociable, had lots of friends, and these are the things that the doctors were looking to find out about. Has he got this history, and where did this episode come from? Because one of the things that disappointed me in my whole treatment at this time from the authorities was that they didn't seek to understand why I'd gone off the rails. It was a case of this must be something in his makeup and his family. But as I later came to understand it was a completely rational, completely normal response to that high-pressured situation in London, and trying to get a job in that very pressurised, backbiting, competitive industry. It was a natural thing for a person to react and to physically and mentally not be able to cope with all those pressures. So I was sectioned, and at the time I rationalised that as initially as part of the fun of the experience, and I think in my mind it was maybe something like the Truman Show or Big Brother experience. So I was thinking, people are, I've hit upon some really interesting things in my mind. I've hit upon some answers to society, and so I'm obviously being recorded, and so while I was in the hospital, I was thinking the secret cameras filming me, and so I was playing up initially to the cameras, and that was all part of the fun for me at the time. When I suppose calmed down, and when the medication kicked in and tried to dull, well, it did dull that initial mania that I was undergoing. I kind of, my whole being was dulled, and so that's when I didn't enjoy that experience of being locked up. I felt my freedom was actually being restrained, and it was. I was being forced to take this medication, which I'd never been on in my life before, and it did bloat me. There's lots of side effects in terms of being jittery, being uncomfortable, and it was horrific. So that was the worst period when I realised that this wasn't a scenario like Big Brother. This was for real, and I was in there quite a short time, so I was lucky. I think I was initially released after about maybe a month, 2 months, and that was really lucky because I had the support of my family when I moved back to Yorkshire, where I was sectioned, and it was only because they were advocating for me that he's well, and he's got this holiday booked to Barbados, which he's really keen on. I was kind of fixated on that, and that was going to make me well, that I was released and allowed to go to Barbados. But when I was released, I kind of still had these thoughts at the back of my mind, and so I wasn't fully over this mania, and I did. I think I went to a music festival and maybe smoked something I shouldn't, and indulged a little bit, and then I did get some more manic thoughts and more activity that kind of endangered maybe myself and family members. So I was sectioned again for a longer period, and eventually was released on medication after about 2 months after. I think, and I'm writing a book about this. Been writing a book for quite a while, examining what thoughts I was experiencing, and I was connecting a lot of things, and I think that was a really interesting thing for me, because I'd always been on a path of degree, finish my degree, study, get a job in advertising, and then make money, go on this path. And when I questioned that, I began to question everything else. And so I think it was this questioning that really affected me. And once I began to question that career path that I knew that I always wanted to go on, and nothing was off the table in terms of questioning. So I questioned religion, I questioned my vision. I wear spectacles. I took my spectacles off. I stopped wearing a watch. I tried to get back to nature, to live with the elements, and just think, well, why do we operate in this society? And so I think there were definitely some very maybe advanced and rational ideas I was struggling with, but I didn't have the capacity at that time to really control all those thoughts. They all came in a whoosh, and I was maybe investigating things like indigenous ways of being without even knowing it was practices like that. I was questioning capitalism without knowing what capitalism was, perhaps, and going against all the things I've been taught about the way society was run. So at the time my thoughts were very fast, and I was connecting. I was even thinking I had telepathic powers at one point, which maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but it was not manageable in myself. I think I would have, but it would have been interesting. I do still think, like I say, I was lucky that I had my family to support me, but I still wonder how what would have happened if that process had been a more natural process. If society was, I don't blame my family for cooperating with the sectioning of myself. But I think if society was set up as again, like I say, in indigenous communities, where if people are experiencing paranormal or different abilities or different activities or things out of the norm, experiencing different episodes of mental health, then society is structured to support and to listen and to help someone work through that. Whereas the experience that I had was that I wasn't listened to, and I was medicated and dulled, and it didn't really matter what was going on in my head, as long as I was calmed down and drugged and got to a place where I was cooperating with society.
God, space. Bay,
The second time I was sectioned was I think around 2 months, which was a tougher period, because I kind of did have to recognise where I was, again medicated, and which was the worst bit about the whole experience, because I'd always been creative, always had lots of ideas, and the medication kind of dulled all those thoughts. And I think that was one of the times in my life I did probably suffer a bit from depression, because having been very close to getting a high-powered job in advertising, I was facing moving back in with my parents, again coming from London back to a small town in Yorkshire, and seeing all my friends doing other things, and me stagnating. So after coming out of the hospital, I was still very much under the influence of medication, very jittery, very confidence was, and my charisma, libido, and everything was affected, and so I was kind of staying on the sofa, a bit down, not wanting to socialise, and that was a tough period, which I came out of through, I think, hard work. I think my mum was very good in that respect. She took time off work to help me sort job applications, to try and refigure what I wanted to do, and without that support I kind of maybe would have been stuck in the system, but I eventually did bar work part-time, eventually got into admin work, doing call centre work, part-time minimum wage employment, which I could manage, didn't really need to think, and then from that period, and maybe a period of about 2 years, gradually built up my creativity again, and started writing, joined writing groups, and eventually was able to process that experience, and have been able to look back now and see that it was a much needed process of divorcing from that competitive advertising world, but then still having the creativity to channel into other areas. So now I've like I said, I've been able to use those skills which I studied and was going to use for the dark art of advertising, which is wordplay, language, and graphic design. I've been able to use those for good, as I like to think, and so I work with various grassroots organisations, doing various bits of promotional work for them, designing flyers, designing books, designing websites, and in the writing I'm a poet, so I've published my own collection of poetry called Ad Liberation, all about the idea of freeing yourself from this consumer world. I'm busy writing a memoir on that period as well, a novel as memoir. And some of the groups I work with are a regular group in Huddersfield, which is an amazing organisation, which is a converted mill in Huddersfield, and they have a space for people to use as a creative sanctuary. So not therapeutic work per se, but just the idea of opening up this space for people to express themselves, to pick up a paintbrush, to draw, to write. That in itself is therapeutic and helps people express what's going on. So I'm very pleased to work with in that capacity.
'Cause I got you on everything. You should probably come